All right. Welcome everyone to Fridays at EBD. And this is a new way of joining through a webinar mode. And like last week, there was something very interesting that we all had shared, which was that intelligence, if treated static or dynamic, there's a big difference in how children perceive it and how they experience it when intelligence is spoken to them as a static or as a dynamic entity within themselves. And we are back at reading What Did You Ask at School Today by Kamla Mukunda. And I just happened to meet someone who also knows Kamla Mukunda, perhaps, and also Usha Mukunda. And I'm really happy to have our guest here who we will be introducing to all of you in the coming months. So, we're going to pick up from where we left last Friday. And if any of you have anything to say before we start reading, please put it on chat or unmute yourselves and please share whatever you want to. Okay. So when you see this image on the screen of a girl lying down with a system there, what do you see there? What is happening to the girl? Harshita, what do you think is happening to the girl?
I can see some mathematics equations over here. So I think she's just remembering her time at school studying maths.
Yes,
I think
looks
so.
like that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. To find out what she has learned, I will have to give my student a context, a task for which she needs to use what she has learned. And this could be a worksheet, a homework assignment, or an academic test. Her performance must allow me to infer something about her competence, knowledge, skill level, and understanding. Thus, the task becomes an instrument that measures learning, just as a metal ruler or a weighing scale or a blood pressure monitor measures various things. But metal rulers, unlike academic tests, are uncontroversial instruments. You don't find people debating the merits of metal rulers or getting upset about them one way or the other. The reason why tests are so controversial and require so much of our attention has to do with problems of definition, validity, and reliability. We will look at these issues in turn. So, this brings us to what we had actually read last week, which was a lot about assessment and what kind of assessment in schools and classroom are more appropriate for students learning. Are we, le- are we doing the assessment for learning or are we doing assessment of learning? And there's a big difference between that. And it is as important for an educator to talk about what assessment means as much as it is important for students to learn what an assessment means to them. The aim of a metal ruler is to measure length. People are agreed on the definition of length. One dictionary says it is the extent from end to end. We don't hear anyone arguing that the length of a line should be the angle it makes with the north south axis of the earth, for example. Given this consensus in definition, the metal ruler does a fairly good job of measuring length. It clearly measures what is supposed to, the extent from end to end, and thus it is a valid instrument. Also, repeated measures using the metal ruler will give more or less the same value for length, and this makes the instrument reliable. Without validity and reliability, the instrument would be virtually useless. Imagine using a crooked metal ruler or one with wavy edges, an invalid instrument. Or imagine using a calibrated elastic band to measure length, an unreliable instrument. Now let us look at the case of the academic test, whose aim is to measure the student's knowledge and understanding. Right away, we can see that we do not possess a measuring instrument as valid and reliable as a metal ruler. A person's height is easy to measure, but her level of understanding of a concept is hidden, dynamic, and must be inferred from her behavior. So, first of all, we need an agreement on a definition of knowledge and understanding, just as we had for length. Since we have a few students between us, Myra, would you like to maybe unmute yourself and share with us what assumptions do you hold about assessment and how do uh, systemic assessments feel to you? Or would you like some assessment which is actually designed according to what you have learned and understood? Myra, are you able to hear me? Maybe Manisha ma'am can share. Since she's a teacher, maybe she can
See,
describe.
assessments are important, but it is not necessary that it has to be a formal assessment. It can be informal also. So, as we are aware that students, their mindset and their understanding level and their intelligence are also different. So, taking the same assessment for everyone doesn't work all the time. So, multiple assessments are required to be taken as per the activity, in the form of the activity, and not always a pen paper.
Okay. So you're saying in a way that there could be multiple ways of assessing, not just one universal method of assessing.
Yes.
Yes, Myra, please go ahead.
Sorry, I could not unmute earlier. I had some issue. So, I feel like that, of course, as ma'am said, there are other types of assessments, and like even in classrooms, teachers observe your behavior, and your report card has a separate section for internals, which includes your class behavior, how much you engage, and all that. But my views on the pen and paper test is that even though it was originally meant for your understanding and to know how much the student has learned over the year, it has basically become that you just cram everything in 2 3 days and just write everything down, and in the next, after the test is over, 2 days later you forget everything.
Yes. And Myra, do you by any chance have exams coming up?
Yes.
It sounded like that, yes. When you are almost running towards the finishing line uh, at the end of the race,
Yes.
you mug up a lot. Thanks, Myra, for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Manisha ma'am, for sharing. It is interesting to ask yourself as a teacher how you would define knowledge and understanding. Quite likely, your answer goes something like, my student has understood when he can do X, Y, or Z. The answer is usually in terms of the measurement process itself. We say that understanding is the ability to answer a particular set of questions correctly. But the problem lies in the choice of questions. Not everybody will agree on a particular definition of understanding, and not everyone will agree on a particular choice of questions. This fundamental problem with definition is easy to forget, especially in a time when performance on tests has become synonymous with intelligence and understanding. It is an extremely illuminating exercise for a teacher just to step back and ask herself, is this examination or test getting at the essence of what I want my students to learn? What aspects of a subject do I want all my students to master? What are the abilities that will distinguish those who are competent from those who are excellent? You can see that it is impossible for a test to be perfectly valid, but there are degrees of invalidity. Some tests are so invalid as to be useless, others are valid enough to be useful. There are a few different ways of evaluating the validity of a test, each with its problems, unfortunately. I think the kind of tests and assessment that we have known have largely been about testing the knowledge, testing what we know, testing the question answers, MCQ, mugging up, like Maira also described. One simple way is to see if the test scores correlate with the teacher's estimates of the student's understanding. In other words, if the results of a test are completely surprising to you, if students you thought had a good grasp scored very low and vice versa, you would not consider that test valid. By this yardstick, many tests do fairly well. That is, most teachers feel that tests are valid when their good students do well and weak students do badly. But there is a potential circularity flaw in this reasoning. Our impressions as teachers of who are the good and weak students are shaped by the tasks we structure for our students in class. Sorry if I'm looking like a ghost right now. There's some electricity issue coming up here. Okay. Maybe for a moment it felt like we are in a mystery room. Sorry. Unless teachers' estimates have some independent basis, they will inevitably correlate with test scores. I would like to ask the adults here and the teachers here if you remember your scores from all the grades very well. If you remember what you scored in grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, and how did it matter to you? How does it matter what we scored on our test? I think a lot of you might remember what you scored on your grade 10 board exam or grade 12 board exam. But what else do we remember from assessment? Is it the fear that you remember the most? I know so many adults, teachers themselves, who still have nightmares of maybe running to a school and uh, they're about to miss an assessment, they're about to miss an exam. Would anyone like to maybe share what you really remember about assessments? If any of you would also like to share anything, no pressure. Miss Minakshi, would you like to share what you remember from your assessments, from your exams?
See, as a student, it was different. In fact, I think I did better in what we had. Because it was live tests, okay. I did better in those rather than a regularly prepared one. I don't know for what some reason, okay. And but as a teacher, I found that okay, many people find it difficult to prepare for any pen and paper test. Ask them to make a game and test each other, or do it through an activity. They are much happier. Okay, but some students, of course, they prefer cramming and doing a pen and paper test. That it's like that. It's not the same for everybody. It's different for everybody. And I've seen some children can perform very well. Like I had to become a writer for one of my students because he had broken his arm, and during his regular exam he performed miserably, and we normally considered him to be you could call him a weak student as well, because he was very naughty and he normally did not participate in anything in class. But when I had to write down for him, I realized he was over average, okay, because I was quite surprised. I thought maybe his spellings might get wrong, because all his answers were right. So I asked him the spellings, the tough spellings, and all those things as well, and he could do everything. It was very surprising. It was very surprising. So you cannot judge a student merely by the fact that he's naughty in class, he doesn't work, or he refuses to write, whatever it might be.
Right. Thanks, Miss Minakshi. I'm also I'm going to bring you back to the question that I actually asked, which was that what do you remember from the times when you wrote your assessments?
So I told you I did not have a problem. In fact, I was very happy when the teacher took a test suddenly as well. Okay, otherwise also it was not such a problem for me, because I think I have in our days it was pen and paper test. We did not have much of an activity or something. So I was quite happy. I did not mind.
This is the
It was
one
only later on.
who is probably scoring
Late,
highest, who does not have a problem.
yeah, it was not a problem for me. I tend to learn fast and recall easily, so that was not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Ms.
But
Minakshi.
there was another aspect of it which started later in my life, when I was after my class 10th. During my class 10th exam, somehow I fell ill, but I had to write the exam. In those days, we did not think of taking a year gap or something like that. So I did write the paper, and did not go very, very well. Thereafter, I developed an examination phobia. I would fall sick in every exam. So that was also true for me. So when something of that sort happens, one it affects us. Okay, sometimes it was a stupid thing, but it was there. So I can tell you this much. But till before my class 10th boards, I was very, very confident in every sense. In fact, yeah, that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Minakshi.
Hi, I might be in the noisy atmosphere around, but I would like to say something if I'm
Yes.
allowed to.
Yeah, of course.
Uh, well, I'm Vandana, and I've been a teacher. This is the first time I'm attending this talk, and very interesting topic on evaluation. And as the question goes, what do we remember? So my school time has been a very, very old story now. But if I think about it now, no, I do not remember marks in any of my primary classes or middle school classes. Um, what I remember is how I felt in the school, how were we treated in the school, and the friendships and the fun times. I think that mattered more, and those are the memories I actually have more than the marks. But I would also like to say that I wasn't a very, very bright student when I was in school, but above average. And my issue was more because my elder sister was in the same school, who used to be a topper in the school. Like in any possible way, she was always a topper. So there was always a comparison. So in one of the classes, I remember when I was in eighth, I got I don't know how I scored the second position in the class, and I was called on the stage, and as it used to be, given the award and all. And I did feel that sense of achievement, or I think my self esteem grew a little bit, feeling that okay, I mean, I'm not as bad as my parents would think or teachers would think as compared to my sister. So doing well, getting good marks did matter because if it was recognized and appreciated. So other than that year, where it was a like special event, I would not remember any of the marks except my board exams.
Thanks a lot, Miss Vandana. That's an elaborate picture of actually what we're discussing here and what Miss Minakshi also shared with us. I think what Miss Vandana also pointed out is of extreme importance to me as well as a teacher, which is of forming friendships in school and not remembering marks so much, but seeing assessments as a way to get validation from, let's say, adults around us, from our parents, from our teachers. So we have to, I think, constantly as teachers remind ourselves of the assumptions we hold about assessments. Thanks, Miss Vandana, for bringing us back to that question.
Thank you.
Another way to check a test's validity is to see if the scores correlate well with other tests. The problem with this kind of validity is that if all the tests are measuring the student's ability to, say, memorize certain facts, they may all correlate well with each other, but it still doesn't mean any of them is really testing understanding. Still, another way of checking a test's validity is to see how it correlates with performance in real life. If we claim that understanding a particular subject should lead to competence in the field, so to speak, then that correlation should be high. One problem with this is that real life situations are dramatically different from academic test situations. Real life involves people working together over a longer period of time on open ended problems with information available to them. But testing is typically individual, time bound, close ended, and closed book. So, studies have found that performance in school correlates well with performance in college, but beyond college, the correlation seemed to break down considerably. For example, doing well in the IS exams requires a whole lot of general knowledge, but being a successful civil servant also requires good interpersonal skills, common sense, and integrity. Both definition and validity are therefore tricky issues when it comes to academic tests. Turning now to reliability, can we say that the test would yield close to the same results on repeated testing? Remember the case of measuring length using an elastic band. We would no doubt find such an instrument useless. In a similar way, if a test would not give us similar results on repeated occasions, of what use can it be? The question of reliability is actually related to the retrieval of long term memories given certain cues at the time of recall. Henry Rodiger, a psychologist interested in the effects of repeated testing, has discovered that retrieval is quite variable and inconsistent. That is, when a student is given a test on the same material on different occasions, he will not always give the same responses. Often, he will recall things on later tests that he did not recall on earlier tests. And this is without any revision in between, of course. Repeated testing seems to produce new memories. These new memories are called recovered memories, and Rodiger's studies show that recovered memories are the norm rather than the exception. Often, this improvement in performance was greater than the reduction due to forgetting. Because of these inconsistencies in the retrieval of things that we know, we cannot set too much store by the results of a single test, especially when it is a test of mostly memory. There is always some measurement error in a test score. Even though we cannot say exactly what the measurement error is, we can be sure that it is at least several percentage points. Certainly, the error is enough that we are not justified in making distinctions between students based on decimals of a percentage point. For example, if one student scores 88%, his true score may be anywhere between 84% and 92%, and he is therefore not clearly superior to another student who scores 85%. So I suppose the question is, how can we make a test more like a metal ruler? And the answer is, we can certainly improve the quality of a test, but it will never be as valid or reliable as a metal ruler. This means that we really need to change the way we interpret test scores. Our current naive acceptance of what those numbers tell us is simply not justified. I think we have someone raising their hand. Yes, Miss Minakshi, please.
Why do we need to make tests, similar to a metal ruler? Is there any need for it? Okay, I mean, I understand marking is important, and but it's not that important. Is it that important that everybody should be measured to the T? And how would you measure somebody to that extent? Our brain functions differently at different places, okay, and different times, okay. So to put someone through such a test where it is like a metal ruler is, I think, a little harsh.
Um, I think Miss Minakshi, maybe you joined us
Mhm.
late, but there was actually what you're saying is making complete sense. But what we read before that, the analogy that
Mhm.
you're setting up between the metal ruler and test scores is different, and
Mhm.
I'll copy paste it.
I heard that. I heard that. And at that time also, I could not participate because there's a lot of noise around because of the generator and all those things. Some of it I'm getting and some of it I'm not getting right now. But the thing is, still, I got that analogy of testing and all those things. But is it necessary?
I think the question you're
Why
asking
is it necessary?
is interesting.
Is it necessary? Why is it necessary?
Yeah. Maybe Miss Vanna might like to step in and maybe share what she wants to say about what Miss Minakshi is asking.
Um,
Reading, so I do
Well,
not.
I'm sorry, I didn't actually get what exactly Miss Meenakshi's point is here. Maybe she's saying what she's trying to say is that exams should not be as hard as a metal ruler. Like there should be some flexibility in them and some like which in terms
No,
of
no,
consideration and all.
no. That is part of it, but why do we need to make the examination so precise? That is what I'm saying, that that it should be equivalent to measuring a height of a person by a metal ruler. That is what I'm trying to say, because human beings, everybody is different. Not only are we different, we behave differently at different times, okay, and it's not necessary that every test will give the same result.
Yes, I mean what you're saying is definitely like, completely true. As uh, we have been talking about like there are different types of students, different ways of learning, and somebody mentioned that there should be different types of assessments for them. And similarly, I guess yes, the assessments should be very varied. And I've like to be honest, I've seen it at many places also where there are different levels and the assessments are done according to their levels. Like if a group of students they are not very interested in like reading and learning, they're given different type of assessment where they watch a video and then do some online tests. Or some students like to do it more as a in a way in a form of an art, so or a research work, so they present like posters or um, bring some information in a way of any project work. So if that also shows if they have gained the knowledge what we are expecting them to gain and learn. And if it is there, so assessments are based on that too. But I don't know whether my answer is valid here or not.
Oh, it's very much valid, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Because in this
Minakshi, I
chapter
just
itself, they're saying one child may get an 88, and he may range
Minakshi,
between 84 to 92. So that
yes,
is it.
Minakshi, I'll just give Myra a turn too. Myra, please unmute yourself and yeah.
Uh, so I think I'd like to answer ma'am's question. So what I feel the text over here is trying to say that uh, it's comparing the test to a metal ruler to compare its accuracy, because it's saying that right now a test cannot tell you how smart or how non-intelligent a student is. So we need to make it more accurate, because no matter how much a teacher disagrees, the test scores do create a hierarchy in a teacher's mind and even in a student's mind. So I have personally experienced this, that teachers do give more there is difference between how they're treating the students who get good marks and how they're treating the students who get bad marks. What the text over here is trying to say, that these test scores by which we are judging how smart a person is not accurate. So if we are judging a person, we need to make tests more accurate.
That is
Myra,
exactly my point, my Myra. That the thing is, it should not be that we should be judging anybody based on test scores. Okay, we should not be, and the need for accuracy comes only when we want to judge someone, and judging is not something which we should be doing. Okay, we should help as teachers or whoever, wherever we are, we need to help them under grasp things internally. Okay, now how they do it, what they do it, whether their marks can range between 84 to 92, it does not make a difference. As long as a child understands, internalizes what is being taught, and that is what we have to understand. We don't have to judge them on a point 10 scale, right? That is what I'm trying to say. Where is the need for it? There's no need for
I think
accuracy, I think.
uh, let's let's see what Kamla Mukunda has to say about interpreting the test scores. And I think a lot of the questions that all of you are raising together would start to come together, and maybe we get some newer perspective from her to hear. So let's pause the discussion here and come back to it after reading this bit. Manisha ma'am, I see that you unmuted yourself. Can I
Yeah,
come back to you?
since you wanted to go ahead, so I have like muted again. I just want to say nobody wants to judge the children. It is just a perception. And if we take marks as a mirror, the reflection of the understanding, when somebody scores well, it shows that they are persistent, they are consistent, they are focused, and determination. So the only reason of checking the children's mark is just to check on their required skills, because a student is understanding or not the concept. We can have the qualitative or quantitative exam, and that is how teachers come to understand that which is exactly the part or the skill which is required to be enhanced. And these skills are actually important for their livelihood, and not only that, for having a better career. So marks are not everything. I do agree with this, and we are no one to judge. But at the same time, children should be focused, and that we can take as their marks as a mirror, their own reflection. They are focused or they are determined or not, the marks can show. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Miss Manisha. We'll keep coming back to this discussion, and I think it uh, touches everyone's lives here, because I think at some point we've all been to school and been a part of this cycle. So let's read further and find out how to interpret test scores and what could be changed, or how we could shift the perspective here. If a metal ruler were somewhat, though not totally, erroneous, we would interpret its results with some tentativeness. Similarly, when a teacher assesses his students in the classroom using formative assessment, the results are held more as a working hypothesis than an absolute conclusion. This hypothesis is quickly changed or abandoned when the teacher probes a little, asks further questions, or tests in a different way. Teachers know not to make firm conclusions from the results of the little class tests and assignments they administer. However, the results of summative examinations are not looked upon as hypotheses. We treat those numbers as if they were lens read off from a perfectly engineered metal ruler. The results of such examinations arrive too late and are too unspecific to be useful as feedback. So instead, they're used to make decisions about students, who gets what in terms of further opportunities, and also to evaluate teachers, schools, and boards of education. These uses make such examinations high stakes. In India, test scores are largely used to make crucial decisions about individual children. If an admissions board or a prospective employee relies on a single number to choose whom to accept and whom to reject, mistakes can occur. The figure shows a hypothetical plot of a sample of test scores against some measure of job performance were all applicants to be hired. The correlation between the two is reasonably strong. You can see that most high scorers will go on to perform well on the job, and the most low scorers will perform poorly on the job. But there is also a small group of low scorers whose job performance is satisfactory, and another small group of high scorers whose job performance is not. If only those scoring above the cutoff on the test are hired, the decision will be wrong for both these small groups. And the groups may not be that small either. As the relationship between test scores and job performance gets weaker, and this has to do with validity, the false hits and misses become more in number, as you see in the second figure. Of course, there is no such thing as a perfect decision free from these two errors. But even if there is nothing we can do to improve a test's validity, the least we can do is to use multiple criteria for decision making. Test scores are also used to evaluate teachers and programs. In some parts of the United States, for example, teachers and schools are actually rewarded and punished on the basis of the scores. Teachers can get pay raises or be discharged, and schools with low average scores can be taken over by government appointed experts. Interestingly, one study in the US documented a group of teachers' strong opposition to the high stakes testing imposed upon them. Some of their negative feelings naturally had to do with the fact that they themselves were being tested and being held accountable for poor results. But the study showed that teachers were especially bothered about the fact that the tests do not allow for good teaching practices or meaningful learning. The paper, whose authors are Mary A. Barksdale, Ladd, and Karen Thompson, includes many long and stirring quotes from teachers, and I have just excerpted just a few here. Just think what you could do if you took all that time spent on testing and preparing for testing and used it to teach. There's way too much testing. The other quote is, they don't need real teachers to prepare children for tests, and in fact, I think they could just develop computer programs to do this. The other quote is, learning for the test isn't meaningful. The scores are up, but the kids know less, and they are less as people. And the other last quote is, I think the tests were designed because everyone thinks there are so many bad teachers, and this would make the bad teachers improve. But it isn't, in fact. It is giving bad teachers an excuse to continue doing what they've always done, lots of skill and drill. It's a license for bad teaching. The problem of using tests to evaluate people and programs arises largely due to the poor quality of assessment. In this last section, we look at ways to increase the validity and reliability of academic tests. Since we are coming closer to 6:15, I think Myra wanted to say something, or some of you wanted to say something about the assessment. What do you think about interpreting the test scores now? And what do you all understand from what we just read? And Miss Minakshi, do you think anything differently about the metal ruler analogy with the test scores now?
See, the thing is, now they are saying that the test scores are not that important in a way. They are saying, okay, and they don't really prepare children and teachers in any way. Those are the last few sentences in a way, right? So, what to say now? In a way, what I think is sort of validated, I think.
Yeah.
But it's not about being validated. It's more like we that judgment in a test, okay, that places a child above another one just because somebody has got 2 marks extra or 3 marks extra, or whatever, okay, because I've seen plenty of children who may get a 30, maybe 35, and their intelligence level is no less than a 90, a person who has got 90. And that is why I've said this. Like I told you about that boy for whom I had to write, okay. So then I realized, that was the time I realized that I need to look at children more closely before, judging them. Now this particular boy, he was naughty, so he did not participate much in the classroom discussions or anything. His homework was incomplete, his classwork was incomplete. His mostly he did not complete his test. He just wrote as much as he thought was necessary. And then when he had somebody to write for him, it was a totally different scene. Mm.
Thanks, Miss Minakshi, for sharing. I think this assessment bit of the book is going to be as interesting and engaging like the other chapters of the book. I would invite all of you to please reflect over assessment and the assumptions we make about assessments, and then how do we make sense of the scores that we receive as teachers, as students, and come back to the next session on Friday. We will meet on the 30th of January, and thank you to each one of you who join us every Friday at our reading session. Thank you so much from EBD. All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thanks, Miss Vanna. Bye.